this episode of Common Sense, the podcast. Hope you guys didn't get too carried away over the weekend and everybody's ready for the Super Bowl. But this week, we've got one of my good friends on here. You guys welcome Brandon Byers to the show.
How's it going?
What's up, man?
Not much, brother. Same stuff, different diaper.
Same stuff, different diaper. Well, Brandon, for those of you that don't know, Brandon and I are connections through Industrial Cigar Company. Brandon used to be the GM over there.
Indeed.
Until he decided to move on to bigger, better things, because I think he got, what you guys called in the episode you did, herding cats. He got tired of herding cats, I think is what you guys called it.
Yeah. Decided to take a step back. Got a grandson now, so even though I look way too young for that. But,
I mean, absolutely.
Got my first grandson and getting to spend time with him and supporting the wife and her business, and it's been a nice little reprieve.
At least now you have a reason to have all those little rubber duckies in your Jeep. Well, Brandon, why don't you, for those of you that people that don't know you very well or don't know what your story here, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you grew up, what your background is, stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm originally from Waxahachie, Texas, so just south of Dallas.
I love that. You're like the first person I know that is legitimately from Waxahachie. My father-in-law, who is Jordanian, when they first moved over here, that became their running joke. That's literally what they tell people, because nobody knows, or at least most people don't, where Waxahachie is. So they all say they're from Waxahachie. I think it's the funniest thing in the world. It's like foreigners that come to America, when they decide to pick out an American name, it's like they just pick whatever that starts with the same letter as their God-given name, I just think it's so funny that they pick Waxahachie of all places. I've been trying to find him one of those T-shirts that says I'm from Waxahachie.
Yeah. You hear it most of the time. It's Waxahachie or Waxahoochie, and I mean, I've heard all sorts of different variations. But no, my mother grew up there. My grandfather built their house out there, and mom went to school there. Aunt, uncle. I had some of their teachers when I went through high school, and so they just recently sold that house, and so we don't have any more connections there, but it'll always be home. It'll always be hometown. So, but no, Waxahachie, Texas, graduate. After I graduated, I actually went to community college for a little while out in Louisville, Corinth area.
Okay.
It was North Central Texas College, and while I was there, I was working as a jailer for Denton County, and just trying to get some law enforcement experience. Law enforcement was always very interesting to me, is what I kind of wanted to do. And in the course of doing that, I met my wife, Megan, and after 3 months, we got engaged, and after a few months after that, we got married. And coincidentally, this month, we'll be celebrating our 20-year anniversary.
That's awesome,
So,
man. Congratulations.
heck yeah. Thank you.
We just had our 10 years, so I know that's 20 seems just so far away.
Blink of an eye, brother. It's just like with kids. Before you know it, they're all grown up, and you don't know where the time went. But,
yeah, I know, because when we were talking about it, all of a sudden it was man, it's really been 10 years. And then you start thinking, well, how long did we date before? And then man, wow, all right, yeah, that did fly by.
The only thing you don't want to do is tell, oh, God, it's felt like forever.
Forever.
It's only been 20? Are you kidding me? No. No, I met my wife, and in the process of doing that, I actually decided to go in the military, and it was one of those.
What I think's crazy that you guys. I don't know how many. I don't think I've ever heard this before, that the person got married before they went into the military.
Yep. Yeah, it was. She wasn't completely on board with it at first. Her reaction was, well, if I wanted a guy who was in the military, I had to marry a guy who was in the military. So it was kind of
I can imagine.
Okay, so is that one of those, yes, you're cool with it, or no, I'm gonna have to sell you on it, or what are we talking here? And but she knew where my passion was, and so I actually joined the Air Force. My dad was an Air Force vet, as well as my mom's dad, and my dad's dad was in the Navy. And so I think had a cousin was in the Navy, got another cousin that was in the Marines. So we've got all the branches except for National Guard checked off on the box. But no, I went to the United States Air Force, and I joined as a security forces officer, or a cop, basically. I was an MP. And so, went to San Antonio, went to Lackland, did both my basic training and tech school is what they call it, basically, where you learn how to do your job. And from there, we went to Las Vegas. Went to Nellis Air Force Base. I know,
dirty job. You get all the rough assignments right out the gate.
Dirty job, but somebody had to do it. So, honestly, it was the last base I thought I'd get. It was one of those dream sheet type of deals. Like, yeah, I'll go ahead and check it off, and ended up getting it. One of the reasons was it was at the time it was a Priority 1 resource base, so it had nukes on it, and so they had their own unit for security forces cops that would man that, and they were 100% manned, so you were non-deployable and everything like that. And so that's why I got over there, but I didn't end up being assigned there. So I got assigned to the regular security forces unit, and within 5 to 6 months I was already tasked to deploy, and this was 2005, 2006 era. So it was one of those, you knew it was gonna happen type of deal.
Yeah.
It wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when. It happened a little bit sooner than what I thought it would.
Yeah.
And so initially I was pretty damn scared. I was originally tasked to go to Afghanistan. And after about, I think it was about a week after I got tasked, and I had my date when I was gonna have to report for training and everything, and it was several months away. And so I got a phone call one night from my superior, from my sergeant. He said, well, I got good news and I got bad news. I'm like, okay, well, what's the good news? He goes, good news is you don't have to go to work tonight. I'm like, okay, cool, I'm liking this. What's the bad news? Bad news is tomorrow, 0700, you're reporting to supply. And instead of going to Afghanistan, you're going to Iraq. And so you got to report tomorrow for supply, and then in 2-3 days, you're going to leave for pre-deployment training in Washington, in Seattle.
Oh,
and
wow.
So I was like, yeah, that's pretty shitty. It's pretty shitty news. And honestly, it didn't scare me as much as me thinking that I was then going to have to go in the other room and tell Megan that I was deploying way sooner, and that, starting tomorrow was when I was going to have to start that process. And yeah, it went over about as well as I thought it would, turd in the punch bowl type of deal. And it was one of those scenarios of, well, they can't do that. Yeah, they can do that. They did do that. So, but the pre-deployment was it was grueling, but it was awesome. And
yeah, because you had to be close to like the base that's close to Area 51 and stuff, right?
Oh yeah. There was actually another Air Force base called Creech Air Force Base that was even closer. That's the closest base to Area 51. It's hilarious because there are a lot of trailer parks out there, and when you work out there, sometimes you got to go and help them out, because if they do a test flight on a drone or something like that and it crashes, you got guys in lawn chairs that just watch these things waiting for them to crash, and then they zip out there to go pick up whatever pieces they can.
Yeah.
And then later on they go and raid a trailer park, getting the classified pieces out of there. So it's hilarious to watch. But no, Creech Air Force Base, I actually worked on there as well. But I actually ended up specializing in the 50 caliber gunner, and so did really well there. Got awarded a certification and whatnot, and I ended up basically shooting myself in the foot kind of thing. Once we deployed, we went to Camp Bucca, Iraq. It was the largest detainee facility out in Iraq, and it was right around the area where the Gulf War was fought. It was right on the border of Kuwait. And so we went out there, and once we got out there, I got tasked to be part of an intel unit out there. Basically, it was our job was outside the wire all day, every day, and basically you roamed 6 different sectors looking for intelligence, and you looked for unexploded ordnances from that war and the Gulf War. So we found unexploded pineapple grenades. We found different mortars that never went off. So one of our jobs was to go out there, find it, and then mark it on the satellite so that a ordnance team could come out there and dispose of it later on. And the scariest part is that whole area has a lot of roaming Bedouins and stuff like that, with sheep and camels and stuff, and they've got kids, and they knew that we were looking for stuff like that, so they knew where they were at. And you have these kids that would have a pineapple grenade. They're just tossing it up in the air like it's a ball, walking up to you, because they're hoping to trade it for either water or for candy or batteries or something. And it was one of those situations that, for those people that don't know, anything that doesn't explode is actually more volatile the older it gets. So you could throw it against a brick wall and nothing happened, but flick it and it could go off. And so it was always so scary to see these kids just like doop, doop. And so you go, whoa, just put it down, stop, I'll give you whatever you want. I got a whole case of MREs. Here you go. And you learn real quick that, expect the unexpected. And so I was actually a 50 cal turret gunner for the front vehicle or the rear vehicle. So we had a 4 truck man team. It was 12 guys, 3 guys per truck. And so you had a 50 cal in the front, 50 cal in the back, and then you had 249s, or 240 and 249, which are also automatic mini submachine guns in the middle. And so most of the time I was either the front gunner or sometimes the driver, and every now and then I'd be the rear driver. So I did five and a half months of doing that. And on our first day out, the team that we were replacing actually showed us all the different areas we would be patrolling, and introduced us to some of the Bedouins and people they'd get intelligence from. And while we were there, we had to post security underneath a bridge because the Italians were actually leaving Iraq. They were pulling out. And so they had this several hour convoy of just stuff leaving and going in Kuwait. And so we were just sitting there, and there was a local police unit that was coming through, and somebody did something. I don't know what started it off, but they got ticked off. And before I knew it, we were in this standoff where everybody was pointing guns at everybody else. And, I had my M4, my little AR right here. I had my 9mm Beretta stuck to my chest. And then I already had my hands on the 50, so I whipped it around and pointed it at these 2 guys. And so it was one of those situations. He goes, that I figured, okay, you know what? You can point that at me, but you're going to be red mist by the time I get to the other guy. And I was scared shitless. I didn't know what was going to happen. And before, I think it was minutes. It felt like hours, but minutes later, everybody was standing down. We figured out, someone just either flagged a weapon or something, and before I knew it, everybody was pointing guns at each other, and we finally got it de-escalated and got it. Cool. And I was thinking, this is day 1.
Yeah.
This is day
one, and we're already pulling guns on each other.
Exactly. And I'm like, this is going to be horrible. But 5.5 months later, I loved that job. I really did. It was always exciting. You always had stuff. The only thing that really sucked was when you were looking for unexploded ordnances. As a gunner, you're the lookout driver. You're pretty much the lookout while we're going and securing routes. You're looking for wires sticking out, trash that could possibly be,
camouflage.
Yeah,
for
exactly.
device.
You're looking for roadside bombs and stuff like that. Dead carcasses that might have it in there, and so which is harder than you would think, because the whole country honestly has trash everywhere. They don't have a waste disposal system like we do, and so literally there's just trash 6 feet high all over the place. It smells like a toilet, and there's trash everywhere. So looking for wires or trash and whatnot, you see it everywhere. So everything looks like a damn bomb. But every now and then you see something that might stick out, so you have to get them to stop, and then you mark it, but you have to be 100% sure. You can't call in a team for something that might be and it ended up not being.
Yeah.
So you have to be 100% sure. So we got to draw straws, and somebody's got to go out there and confirm that it is a device. And so you literally have to walk to it, and if it's a wire, you have to pull on the wire, and hopefully it'll pull all the way out of the ground. If you pull on it and it stops and it doesn't pull out, then yeah, that's probably a device. And the only gear you have is a vest and a helmet. And so I drew that straw probably twice, and I remember thinking, you go out there, you take all your radio equipment off, and you go out there and you pull on this wire, or you're looking at this device to see if it's connected to anything. And especially when you're pulling on the wire, you kind of wince. You're like, as if that's going to do something if it goes off,
Yeah.
You should have, just pulled on it.
I can't believe that, with all our technology and stuff, we're literally drawing straws, playing paper, rock, scissors to see who has to go yank on the damn cord.
Yep.
Or pull the pin, whatever you want to call it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this was
shit.
2005, 2006, and at that time, they didn't have the ballistic bubbles for turret gunners. I had an old style crank turret that was busted that I had to use bungee cords to operate, and you just used your weight to sling it around, and then you would lock it in place. And we had up armored kits on our Humvees, but that was it. It was just a jungle Humvee that was spray painted tan, and it was now a desert Humvee. We didn't even have the right jacks. Once it was up armored, it was about 14,000 pounds, and you had to use a different jack because the old one would crack. It would bust under the pressure. But we didn't have those jacks, so we had to do what was called a a combat tire change where you had to find a dune or like a little hill where you would run up on until the tire you needed was suspended in air, and then you could change the tire. But then you had to spend like an hour, almost 2 hours getting it off of there so that you could keep on going.
Because it's spinning.
Exactly, because
There's no weight
half of
on
it's
it.
up in the air, you know. And so, we did some very unique fashioning of equipment and rigging stuff to make sure it worked correctly.
So what, if you don't mind me asking, and we can dive into this or not, like what, going into this, like where do you stand religiously, and did this change your outlook on God or anything like that? I always wonder this with military guys, especially when you're someone that's doing what you're doing. I mean, that's almost the same as the special forces operator that's like coming around a corner that knows he's going into action. You know, you're going over there to pull a wire out of the ground that you don't know if it is a live bomb on the other end of. That's got to change your faith
your
or your
perspective
thoughts
definitely
a little bit.
Shifts. But no, you know, I'm a Christian. I've been a Christian. My parents were Christians, and you know, I had faith, and me and my wife, you know, both Christian faith. And every morning, someone in the pod that I was sleeping in, the guy that was there before me, had like a combat prayer that was posted up in his locker, and he just left it there, and that was the locker I got. So I'd sit there and recite that every morning before I would leave. And I figured everybody didn't really talk about it, but we all had letters that we wrote, especially people that were on our unit, because we were outside the wire versus people that were up in a tower or inside the wire that did patrol or, you know, it was just the likelihood of something happening was really, really high. So we all had our letter somewhere on us or in our go bag that we had with us. And, you know, anyone that says that, oh, no, I wasn't scared at all is absolute lying. You know, is an absolute liar. Because, you know, every day that you go out there is just, you just don't know if you're going to come home.
Yeah.
And so for me, it definitely, it strengthened my faith, especially every day that I got to come back and nothing had happened. You know, I was very grateful for. And it honestly made me grateful for the things that I had back at home. You know, I was making plans of what I was going to do with my kid, and you know, things that I'd probably change up and you know, do differently, and so I definitely say your perspective shifts to something that's more appreciative, and you really understand how good you have it when you're in a situation in a third world country where people just don't, and you know, you realize that, you know, your faith in whatever you believe in and the faith of your family and your support system is huge. And so luckily I was able to call my wife. I called her constantly when we would talk, or this was right when video conferencing was like first coming out, so you know, it was spotty at best, but every now and then we'd get to do that. And I got into a habit of I would send her flowers all the time from, you know, a place, and you know, just to let her know that I was thinking of her and everything. And but the thing was that I knew, because of my job, that the likelihood of something happening was high. I wanted her to be prepared if something were to happen. And so I always told her, hey, if a chaplain, commander, and the first sergeant come to your house, likelihood is that something's seriously happened, or I'm gone. Yeah. And so I would walk her through the process, and you know, we had to get my will done before I left and everything like that. But I told her, I was like, you know, if the chaplain's there, it's really, really bad. If the chaplain's not there, then likely it is I'm alive. But yeah,
I've sustained some kind of injury for sure.
Exactly. So it was.
Is that something you just decided to do on your own, more or less, or is that more, do you think, like something you're taught and that they tell you should prepare that way?
You go through briefings. You know, it's not like we were specifically told or trained to, like, hey, make sure your spouse says no. This was more of a personal thing. I wanted Megan to be prepared to understand that, look, I'm not leaving with the intent of not coming back, but there's a chance. There is a chance. You know, this was right when things were really getting hot and heavy. People were getting injured and killed all the time, especially in you know, ground pounder work like I was doing.
Yeah.
You know, it was just
And I don't think a lot of people think of the Air Force as somebody doing
I get that
either.
all the time.
You know, I mean, like this Navy, you expect to be on a boat. You know, Air Force, you expect them to be on a air base or something like that. You don't expect that there's a foot soldier out there doing EOD stuff, you know, or whatever.
I mean, after 9/11, it was equal opportunity military. Everybody deployed. Didn't matter what you were doing. Now, you know, certain jobs, you really weren't going to see any combat. But, you know, I was a cop. I was a ground pounder. And so when we weren't securing bases, we were used as deployed troops to help secure bases out there and to gather intel. And you had your special forces teams like, combat troopers. You had TAC-P, you know, all sorts of different things. But, you know, we were used as an all-around police force for either, you know, in the States, overseas, or, you know, for convoy security, which is what the unit that I was a part of is what we did. Yeah. And so, but, you know, talking about, you know, the things that we didn't have, it was always funny because a lot of us were trained how to be combat lifesavers, which basically meant you know how to do an IV and you knew how to do tourniquets. But nobody was a medic. And so, like, if you were part of an Army unit of what we were doing, which was, it was an ASO unit, Area Security Operations, usually they had a medic on board. We didn't. We had combat lifesavers. So if the shit really hit the fan, they could do tourniquets and they could put you on an IV, but that was about that's the best care you were going to get until an actual medic arrived. And you never really thought about it until something happens.
Right.
Because, you know, 5.5 months in, our team that was going to replace us and we were going to come home actually came early. And so they were actually transferring a lot of us back onto like on-site duty that would be easy to leave whatever we needed to. And I actually volunteered to stay on the ASO unit because I didn't want to get stuck up in a tower or doing something where, God forbid, I end up getting bored and do something and get in trouble for it. Because a lot of guys had a little too much time on their hands and were getting a shitload of trouble and ruining their careers. And I thought to myself, I'm like, you know, I enjoy doing this, so I'm good. I'll just, you know, when it's time to go, let me know, and then I'll transfer over, and then we'll leave. And so I never knew how impactful that decision would be. And so on October 16th, 2006, we were out on patrol, and we were securing a route, and we were actually going back in so that we could have lunch. And the way the ASO units work is when one unit was in, there was always a unit outside. So if you came in for lunch, another unit went out and patrolled while you were gone, and then you guys would switch. And so we came in, or we were on our way in for lunch, and I was actually thinking, like, oh, am I going to have spaghetti tonight, or am I going to have like a chili or a Philly cheesesteak sandwich, you know, because we had this really great, you know, what are they called?
Mess hall.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, they had all sorts of stuff that they would cook for us, and so I was really excited about that. I was super hungry. And then we got called to go back out and secure a route because the convoy, it was a detainee convoy, was leaving to go out to Kuwait, and they had already left. So we had to go and patrol really quickly. Well, on our way there, we actually had some Bedouins that stopped us midway and said that someone had come and kidnapped their son and drove off. And we had never encountered this before. 5.5 months of doing this job, and this had never happened before. So, you know, everybody's on guard. Everyone's, you know, like, what the hell's going on? And so we did like a cordon perimeter of security, and we're trying to find out what happened. Well, we called back to base to say, hey, there's something going on here. You know, tell them to stop. You know, we didn't know that they had left yet. We were like, hey, delay it. There's something going on. We need to do an investigation and figure out this area is okay. And then they told us that they had already left. And when a convoy leaves, they don't stop and they don't turn around. They just go. And so we decided, okay, tell them to stay in that area. We've got to go and patrol or secure the bridge, and then we'll come back later and we'll do an investigation. And so we went out and we secured the bridge. Nothing happened. Convoy came through. No problem. So we're like, okay, you know, maybe this is just a weird coincidence. But on our way back, I happened to be the rear gunner that day in the rear vehicle, and so on our way back, we actually hit a roadside bomb, and this particular one's called an EFP, explosively forced or foreign projectile. And so basically what it is it's a shape charge lined with copper, so that when it goes off, it superheats the copper and liquefies it basically, so it goes right through up armored equipment, then solidifies and becomes shrapnel. And this particular type of roadside bomb has injured and killed I don't know how many people. It's a dirty device, and some people died just because of how it's made. It was so dirty that, you know, you got infected and just died from the infection alone. And it actually ended up hitting the rear end of the vehicle. It was a daisy chain of 4, and only 3 of them had gone off. So when it went off, the truck, I remember I was standing up and I saw this giant dirt plume and like a small like orange flash, but I didn't hear anything. That was the weird part. Like, I didn't hear anything. I just saw it. So it was like watching a war movie on TV, but it was muted. And the next thing I knew, and it was late afternoon, you know, when we were headed back.
Yeah.
And so I was standing up, and I remember it going off and my hand going up. And then the next thing I knew, I woke up. I was no longer standing up. I was laying in the bottom of the Humvee, and it was dark. It was dusk, and so like some time had passed. And so my truck commander, it turned out he had gotten a couple pieces of shrapnel on his back, dislocated his shoulder, and had a concussion. And it was about the same for the driver, but most of it had gone through the back. And so when I looked up, the tip of this finger had been blown off, and it was just dangling. And luckily I had gloves on. The gloves was the only thing that was keeping the tip of the finger attached. And I looked down at my leg, and it looked like someone had taken a shotgun at close range and fired. And I mean, uniform was all torn up. There was blood everywhere. What I didn't know is I had impact gloves on at the time, and a piece of shrapnel had gone through my wrist, and it blew out my palm, taking with it bone, tendon, and clipping an artery. And so I was actually bleeding out. And I thought this was the worst thing, but as this was the one that was actually the most life-threatening. And so they got me out of the vehicle, and I remember when I first realized what had happened, I mean, I started crying. Like, I just couldn't control it. And I couldn't see, and I thought it was because of the tears, but it was more because I'd smacked my head and there was a little bit of blood. It wasn't bad, but there was just blood in my eyes, and the more I wiped, the worse it got. And I remember getting really, really scared, like, oh God, what am I going to do? What's going to happen? And then I remembered I was getting super, super tired. And then amazingly enough, I thought about the training that we had gone through ahead of time, and, you know, talking about how if you do get injured, conserve your energy, because, you know, the more you flail around, the more you lose control, the quicker you are to lose more blood and to be more active. And
yeah.
So I told myself, I was okay, I got to calm down. I'm getting really, really tired. I need to just calm down. And so I got really, really quiet, and that scared the crap out of my truck commander. He's like, what are you doing? What's wrong? I'm like, I'm fine. I'm trying not to freak out back here. And so they finally got me out of the vehicle, and luckily there was an Army ASO unit that was at the Kuwaiti side and saw the explosion, so they came to investigate what was going on, and they had a medic on board. And so luckily that medic, and I've never been able to learn his name, or find out who it is, but I always send out major props because that man saved my life. If he had not been there, I would not be here.
Yeah.
Because I've seen the medic notes. I lost so much blood. The fact that I'm even here is a miracle, honestly. They had to put, what did they say, 5 to 6 bags of blood back in me. I mean, I was tapped out by the time they got me to Kuwait. And I remember being annoyed at the time. I was getting asked all these questions of where I'm from and just like pleasantry stuff. Mm-hmm. And I was so irritated because I'm like, why are we talking? Why are we having a conversation right now? And I realized later on that it was because they were trying to keep me awake and talking and alert rather than just falling asleep. And so I remember going, wow, I was a dick to those guys. Like, I'm from Couchville, USA. Can you get me out of here? And, but luckily I got to come home. And, you talk about religion and, based off my faith, I remember one of the ways I tried to calm myself down was I recited the Lord's Prayer. And I remember almost making a deal. I felt like I was making a deal with God. I said, look, I understand that you've got no reason to hinder or to hear me out or to help me in any way.
Yeah.
I haven't lived a perfect life, but anyway, I lived a good life, I thought. But I want to be able to say goodbye. I just want to be able to get home and tell my wife and my daughter, how much I love them and that it's going to be okay. And my mom and dad, and then thank them so much and how much I love them and please take care of my family. So if you'll just let me do that, it doesn't matter if it's on a tarmac in some state, as long as I can get over, see them, I'm yours. I'm all yours. You can take me, no qualms, no arguments, nothing. And, I'm always really, really grateful because not only did I get to go home and see them and talk to them, but, I've been here since then. And, I didn't initially lose my leg. I did 7 years of limb salvage, and it was horrible, absolutely horrible. I almost wish that I had it amputated then rather than waiting, because it was misery and surgeries every year, all the time. I've had 32 plus surgeries between my hand and my leg. And
wow, I didn't know that part.
I've been 7 or 8 years surgery free so far, and I'm really hoping to keep that record for a little while longer. I've had my fill.
Yeah, we're all hoping you don't have to do that anymore, man. I think you've paid enough forward, man. That. Hey, thank you, man. Thank you for your service. I don't even think I've got to say that yet. I mean, I know you and I've had talks before, but
I appreciate it, brother.
Thank you, man. You've paid the ultimate price. You lost a limb.
I look at it as occupational hazard, as funny as it sounds, because that's what it is. It's occupational hazard, and I'm always appreciative. And man, thank you for your service. Just raising your right hand, being there, being willing to do what you need to do, not for yourself but for other people you've never met, I think is courageous within itself.
It's the hardest part, regardless. I think, because when I was in the Navy, granted I was only there through boot camp, but that's one of the hardest things I know it was for me to come to terms with, when you're with a lot of other people that are all there for different reasons.
Yeah.
And they raise their hand for different reasons.
Yep.
The reality is you've got everything there from people that are being forced to be there because of the law and that were probably going to jail.
Yep.
And didn't have any other choice but to sign up. They definitely don't want to be there, but it's the lesser of two evils for them.
Exactly right. I had a guy in our tech school class like that. And
then you have people that truly want to be there.
Yep.
Then you have the generational ones that, like, my whole family served, and they're the ones that are going to be trying to go 1,000 miles an hour.
Oh, yeah.
And then you have other people that just not sure what they wanted to do with life and made that decision. So it's I know for me personally, it was extremely scary to sit and think about my life is in this quote unquote idiot's hand. I'm not, there's a couple people here I'm like, yeah, cool, I got your 6, I want to be on that team.
That's exactly right.
But then there's other people that are part of your team and you're like, man, this guy could give a rat's ass. Like, but I got to trust this guy with my life.
There was a couple of times we had to have conversations with people, and the thing is I don't care what you do in your personal time. I don't care, who you are or what you do. You do you, more power to you.
Right.
But when you're in that situation, you have to be able to trust that everybody is doing what they're supposed to when they're supposed to, because if they don't, people can get hurt or lose their lives. And so sometimes you had to go, look, here's the deal. You're going to cut this out. You're not going to do this anymore. Or we're going to make sure that you're doing something other than this, because we can't afford you to be a liability. And again, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter, where you came from or anything like that. None of that matters. It just your character and your motivation to be here and doing what you're supposed to, regardless if you want to be here or not. You're here. You're with us. You've got to be willing to do what you have to, because our goal is to go home. So if that's your goal, then let's get this job done.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a whole nother level of that when you're deployed.
It's so fast paced. I remember that was one of the hardest things I had to acclimate when I got home. Was it just felt like everybody was going in slow motion, and so because when you're here, you're in the States and you're doing your job and you're living your life. It's you've got that choice. I'll get to that later. This doesn't have to be done right now. You've got the priority level and everything like that. When you're overseas, when you're doing stuff like that, everything's a priority. Everything is a priority, and everybody's is running around like doing what there's. It's getting done. Stuff gets done like like crazy.
Yeah.
And so then you come back home and you're like, oh, I need to do this. Okay, yeah, we'll get that, blah, blah, blah. Or, come back another day, and you're like, no, let's just do it. Like, I'm here to do it. Let's get it done. And so that was a really difficult lesson for me to learn, is to, reacclimate.
I'm sure it helped with your marriage, though. I mean, because the wives, like, if you're getting it done right when they say it, and not having to be reminded 2-3 weeks later that, hey, I asked you to hang that new rod in the laundry room 3 weeks ago. Are you
I think that's
ever
still
going
a
to
lesson that I'm learning? But
Damn, I was trying to give you credit
their timeline that's important to them. But no, when I got injured and then got back and finally got to a stable position, when I was overseas, I had started to develop my political aspirations. When I was in high school, law enforcement and politics were the two things I was just really passionate about. And so I realized, oh, you know what? I'll stay in 4 years, then I'll get out, and I'll start, going towards some political races and do some small-time things and work towards big-time things. And that was what I was going to go after. But this changed everything. I had everything figured out to kaboom, and now I don't know if I'm going to get to stay in. I don't know what's going to happen to me.
Right.
I was panicked because I was afraid that if I got discharged automatically, I don't have a degree yet. I can't do the job I was going to do. Like, what am I going to do? How am I going to support my family? Like, how, what is going to happen here? And so I was scared to death. And luckily I had a great chain of command. And so I got to stay in my full another 3.5 years. I was non-deployable. Eventually I got to a point where I could arm back up. I could still qualify with the expert on my rifle and pistol. And I really couldn't run because of my leg the way it was. So, there was restrictions that I had. But I eventually got into a back office position where I did alarm system security and resource protection for all of Nellis and for Creech. And so, I got stuff taken care of, but I still didn't have my degree. And the only reason I didn't get my degree before, I figured, okay, I'll go in, finish it up. And I was waiting for leadership school once you get to be a sergeant, and then that would count towards, and then I'd finish it up, and then I'd have my degree. And
you were planning on being a lifer.
Oh yeah, absolutely. When I originally wasn't, but when I saw everybody working to save my life, and from the time I got hurt to the hospital to the time I got out, it really made me want to stay in and do a full 20. I was fully ready to dedicate full 20 plus years to the military.
That's amazing to me, because you'd think a lot of people that when they got put in that position, it's like, all right, I've paid my price. Like I'm done. Like. But, I mean, you see it, too. I mean, you look at some of the, obviously, I'm going to think of the more famous stories that are all Special Forces guys, the Brown, I think it's Mike Brown, that was the SEAL that, this guy qualified for, basically, gold team with one eye. Yep. Like, that's insane shit.
Oh, yeah.
This guy is qualifying for, not only has he already become a SEAL, now he's getting to be asked to be in the dev GRU, and this dude's already been wounded. He's got one eye.
Yep.
And yet they don't see him as a liability. He's coming on.
Exactly.
There's several guys like that they lost a limb, lost something, and then it fires them up even more to where they want to go and still prove to themselves that they can do these things.
Some of the branches are a lot more reasonable now with injuries than they were back then. Because I had to do my med board. It took 3 years for my med board to go through to get a decision. And originally the local board there at Nellis was like, hey, you know what? You're good to stay in. You're non-deployable still, but you can re-enlist. You're good to go. And I'm like, great. Well, before the wing commander and everything would sign off on it, they saw my file and said, no. This is too big of an issue. We got to send this up to Randolph over in San Antonio. So they did, and that board out there decided that I needed to medically medically retire. And when I found out, I felt like I went from having everything to nothing in no time at all. And I was so mad, so I went and saw a lawyer to find out, what I could do to stay in. And initially he thought I was trying to get more disability because I think they were going to give me 60% disability from the military. And then you go out to the VA and you transfer it to something larger sometimes, most times. But I said, no, I'm not trying to get more disability. I'm trying to stay in. I'm not trying to leave. And so he goes, well, let me look at your file and go over some stuff, and then, I'll let you know. And he came back going, look, here's your deal. you could go and do a formal board and go and do a PT thing for them. And even though on paper you look horrible, in person you look pretty good. He goes, there's the chance that they're going to go, oh, wow, actually you're better than what we thought you were. So instead of medical retirement, we're going to do a medical discharge, which means that I wouldn't be able to go back on base. I wouldn't be able to keep my benefits. And I had a wife and 2 kids at the time. So it was one of those situations where I begrudgingly signed my paperwork. I'm medically retired. And then went back home and had to figure out what I was going to do from there. And so from there, you know, I had my bad days and I had my good days, but I always had my wife propping me up and keeping me motivated. And so she helped me to get my bachelor's in emergency administration. So I worked for a fusion center in Collin County as an intel analyst. And then after that, I actually went around the country and spoke at a bunch of different venues and stuff, mentoring veterans. And then after that, I worked as a prosthetic technician.
So you did like motivational speaking for other veterans that were amputees and stuff?
Yeah. Other amputees, combat wounded units. I went to several different churches and spoke at different things. I mean, all over.
What equipped you to do that? Was that more like kind of along your political aspirations, like talking to people and having those sharing, or did it help you more, like getting past?
Absolutely. I met someone who mentored me in being able to do that and actually kind of took me in. His name is Dave Reaver. He was a Brownwater Black Beret in the Navy. And he got injured by a white phosphorus grenade. I mean, an amazing man. And he took me in, as it were, mentored me, and actually got me out on the circuit. And I would go around with him and on my own and with some other guys, and we would go over and speak all over the country. And it was something that I really got on board for, because it not only helped me to help other people with situations that were worse or not as bad as mine, but to be able to take what I've got going on and use it to help other people. It helped me every single time. It helped me to process the things that I was going through, the restrictions, the limitations, you know, the things that were to come. And it has helped me to develop a healthy way of dealing with things, healthy coping mechanisms versus bad ones. And you know, I went through and did that and got to meet amazing people and had an amazing time.
What else really helped you with that process? Because, you know, you and I have had conversations in the lounge, sharing a cigar and just sitting around and having conversation. I feel like, and I'm not discrediting, and I don't want to look past the fact that I know you have your bad days.
Oh yeah.
And I know you had some dark times, and I'm not discrediting that at all, but I have watched you personally over the last several years, which I know is several years removed from you doing a lot of this, but what helped you get to that state of mind and to be able to do those things? Because I feel like you've processed a lot of this and that you deal with it better than most. You know, just that's my personal experience of knowing you. And I want to commend you for that, because I think that's very hard. Well, you know what I mean? I know you have a great support system. I know Megan's awesome. Megan really helps you with that a lot.
Oh, yeah.
But, I mean, there's people with all different kinds of levels of stress and issues and disorders and stuff like that. But I just feel like you've done, so maybe, I mean, I think it's important for maybe you to talk about some of those other things that helped you, if there are other things other than just that, because I know there's a lot of vets that listen to our show, and I know some of them still struggle with PTSD. I know you have a slightly more open and different view about PTSD from the conversations I've heard you talking about it. So maybe you can share your thoughts on that and just kind of what else helped you, because I think that's important for other vets and people to hear.
Absolutely. PTSD is something that isn't just restricted to veterans. I mean, it happens to everybody. It's the body's reaction to an abnormal circumstance. So it's a series of coping
mechanisms.
Yes.
Coping mechanisms.
Coping mechanisms that your body develops so that you don't have to go through the trauma that you went through. So paranoia, anxiety,
separation, anxiety,
a slew of paranoia, being, claustrophobia, just not being able to interact in large crowds, or sounds, smells can trigger somebody, and it's the body's reaction to that reminds me or them or it of what was going on at that particular time, during that particular trauma. So it's something that is everybody is susceptible to, and for me, it helped me to do the research on it, to do my own research and really figure out what it was that I was going through, why I would be fine and in the next minute I wouldn't be, why when I heard a loud noise that I wasn't expecting, that I felt like I was going to have a heart attack and I would cry, and I didn't understand it. And it got to a point where I was getting upset and frustrated and angry. And then it's a vicious cycle, because your family, your support, people around you, they develop secondary PTSD because they see you going through and the reactions that you have, and then they start having their own reactions to your reactions.
That's now a trigger to them of what they're about to go through with you.
Exactly. So it's a vicious cycle, because I get upset. I don't know why I get upset. And then I get upset because I can't explain to you why I'm upset. And then you're upset because you don't understand why I'm upset. You see, it just keeps going and it cascades, and it's just a giant wave of crap. And it's natural. Everybody goes through it. 911 operators, first responders. Someone could stub their toe, and if it was bad enough for them, if that's like one of the worst things they've ever gone through, they can develop PTSD through that. They can hear a particular noise that sounded like when they did it, and they'll be like, oh, that's post-traumatic. It's a series of things that your body does to protect you. Yeah. And so doesn't always feel like it's protecting you, but that's what it is. And for me, counseling was a big deal. I made myself go through counseling. I went through counseling. My wife did. We went to counseling together. And ultimately, I've decided that counseling is a great resource for people to use, and it doesn't have the stigma that it used to. And if you think about it this way, I recommend to people and advocate you go to all sorts of counseling. Go to counseling. There's all sorts of services for veterans, military one source. There's programs out there where you can go, like Give an Hour is one that you can go and get counseling for free. They give you a free hour of counseling, and then you do however many hours they've given you, you do that many hours of like public service, community service. And so they're giving an hour, and then you give an hour. So it's an equal exchange.
Trade-off.
But it's to where you, like, if you don't have benefits or you can't afford counseling, you can find ways to be able to get counseled. And so I've done it all. And for me, going through several different things helped me to find the things that I found useful in those and kind of put it together like a quilt. You pick and choose the best pieces of the things that you've gone through that have been useful, and then put it all together. Yeah. And so with that, I've developed, ways that I like to go drive. Back roads, swirly, curvy, straight, pretty roads, that just aren't like in the middle of the city. I love driving, love going to drive. It calms me down. The rhythm helps me to think if I'm in a place where I just like overwhelmed. Same thing for playing video games. Now, video games can be a little bit of a crutch for some people, so you got to be careful with this. But I like playing video games that like RPG stuff where you move around and you do a whole bunch of stuff. I physically can't do that anymore. The older I get, the worse it gets. Right. So I've still got a lot of pent-up energy, though. So I play the game, and so for my brain, it's like, oh, I'm doing all these things. So it helps me release some of that.
Yeah.
Same thing for I'm learning how to do, like, acrylic painting. And, just like little things, nothing major by any means.
I feel like you have a great teacher, because I've seen the artwork your wife does on cookies. So, yeah. I can only imagine how good she is at other things art related. Yeah. And for those of you that don't know, I'll let him throw out a little promo for his wife here. She has this awesome little bakery and makes amazing cookies. And screw you, KO, for not letting me try one just because your team was getting waxed in the first half. But I am going to get me one of those cookies.
Tiny Kitchen Cakery. Go check it out. It's on Facebook. She's got her site out now. My wife does amazing work. But she's a definite help. And, Megan, like you said, she's been my rock. Yeah. If I didn't have Megan, I'd be dead in a ditch somewhere, 100%. I mean, she has literally pieced me together. When I was back home, she was the one that had to nurse my wounds. Like when I had a hole where you could see all the way down to the tendon, she was the one that was plugging it with gauze and getting it wet and wrapping me up.
I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. I would relive your story trying to do that. I'd be out cold.
Guaranteed. She has gone through so much to be able to help me. And, there's nothing I wouldn't do for her. And my children, obviously. it's given them a perspective that I wouldn't choose for them. It's given them a life that I wouldn't choose, but I am grateful for. They've got a perspective that some adults will never have.
Yeah.
They've got a maturity level that some adults also might never get. And I'm grateful for it. But, you know, it really is breaking down what you're going through, finding out what's going on when you go through these experiences and finding out what your triggers are, choosing people that are going to be able to help you, to surround you, choosing a healthy support system, because it is something you choose, not something you're stuck with, and really finding out the coping mechanisms that don't help you. Like, I tried doing a punching bag. All I did was get so amped up and like agitated after I was done. I literally wanted to fight somebody. So I was like, you know what, this is not for me. So I don't do that anymore. Finding those types of things out and going, and it's all trial and error. You know, that's the thing. You've got to be able to try something and maybe it not work for you to figure out that it's not for you, or try something and it work and you realize this is for me. I mean, that's what it's all about. Yeah. And for me, that's been my life. A lot of series of trial and error. And
how do you look at that from being challenged? I mean, obviously you've had to teach yourself a lot of things, like going through that many surgeries. I mean, you probably had to learn how to use a lot of your hand again. Oh, yeah. You've had to learn to walk with a prosthetic. And I'm sure there's times you wanted to throw in the towel. Like, what do you use to stay motivated? I mean, I'm sure your family's a big part of that, but like, what other things do you do to cope with that? Because I know there has to be, you know, for you to be able to look at something like that as a stepping stone and not a roadblock, or, you know, something you can't get past, I feel like you've implemented other things to help you with that. What are some of those things?
A lot of times when I'm having a hard time, I've met veterans, I've met people who are paraplegics. They're literally trapped in their own body. People that are paralyzed from the waist down or from the neck down. Double amputees, whether it's leg or upper extremity. Quadruple amputees. I've met and seen some situations that are way worse than mine. And one of the things that I always try to tell myself is it can always be worse. It literally can. It can always be worse. And my wife, obviously, my family is a huge thing. I still allow myself to wallow just a little bit. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging a feeling and feeling it. Yeah. You just can't allow it to engulf you to the point where you can't do anything else. And I've had times in my life where I've been in those holes. So I've been there.
I think that's like a different level of awareness is what you're basically describing.
It really is. You're being self-aware of knowing of when you're approaching a point where it's going to be hard to come back from. And, you know, I've been to those places, so I know when I'm feeling it. I know when it's coming on. And communication is one of the big things that I do. So I let Megan know, hey, I'm not having a great day today. So that if I happen to be short or snippy, it's nothing to do with her. It's all on me right now. Yeah. And so sometimes I distance myself, not because I don't want to be around people, but it's going to be better so that I don't react and I don't make someone feel like they did something wrong or something happened. There was a friend of mine who, not knowingly, he had no idea. I was walking out somewhere and he honked his horn and scared the living crap out of me. And I was not doing well. And a loud noise like that, inside, I wanted to bust out crying. And so when I get upset or like I get mad. It makes me mad. I don't like being upset. And so I remember whipping around because I didn't know who it was. And I gave him this, you know, eat, death, and die, you know, look. Yeah. Just like, and he realized, and the next day he's like, hey, I'm so sorry, man. I didn't realize. I was like, no. I said, I wasn't doing all well, and, you know, I gave you this look that you had no idea. You were just innocently playing around. And so I distanced myself because I don't want to make someone feel that way. Yeah. And I do the same thing for my kids. I communicate when I'm not having a great day or if I'm going through something and I'm worried that they might translate that as to them doing something wrong or they haven't done something they're supposed to. And that's not it at all.
Well, you do a really good job of that because, I mean, I think you're a really good communicator. But, I mean, I can think of times, like, even just over the last 2 years that I've known you, you know, there's certain days we walk in and, like, we can tell by your demeanor, like, hey, he just wants to smoke a cigar and chill. Like, maybe he's having a bad day. Like, you're good at kind of giving those hints, those cues, I think, now. And I mean, I think that's excellent that you communicate like that with your kids and your wife, because it's one of those things I think some of us that know you a little better can pick up on at times.
It really does come down to, one, communicating, understanding what your triggers are, really just breaking yourself down, knowing that when you're in the darkest place, at some point you've got to realize, okay, this isn't working. So really just talking to yourself and going, okay, what are we doing right now? What are we going through? What do we want to be doing? What is it that's stopping us? Why do you feel like you can't do it? And really just, break it down of the who, what, where, when, why, what,
yeah,
all of it.
Maybe talk about this a little bit, because there's something I heard that you said. I actually picked up on this watching your podcast with Biz on Go Local. I highly enjoyed that while I was doing my show research. Because if you try to do show research on Brandon Byers, this dude is not Mr. Social Media. He's not like Mr. LinkedIn. Like, you better kind of know him or you're not going to find shit. Like, I think he did some top secret shit at Area 51 or something. Like, his shit's wiped. But you talked about a conversation with your first sergeant that I think still probably to this day is very important for you, where he told you it's not what happens to you, but what you do from here.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Talk about that maybe a little bit. I think that was a crucial moment for you too.
Usually there's a big ceremony when you get your Purple Heart. And mine was actually done in the field, which is not done often. So, and they really wanted to do that. So they presented my Purple Heart while I was on a C-130 being transferred from Kuwait to Landstuhl in Germany. And, I was presented, and if you see the picture, my face is all fat and swollen. I'm all bandaged up. Like I look like horrible. I don't look like I'm having a good time. And part of it was I was in and out, like, yeah. But I remember him leaning down, and before I left, this was the last time I saw him until after he got back from his deployment. And he is a man that will always be an important person in my life, and not just because of what he said to me, but he's been a first shirt to me both professionally and personally. Like, he has been a mentor. He's been a man that I can always rely on, who always reaches out to me. We still stay in contact, and it's just an amazing person. And when he said that, he leaned in and said, hey, it's not what happens to you, it's how you react. It's what happens now. That has been one of my keystone things ever since. Because I truly believe that just because you go through something, it doesn't define you. Me being a wounded veteran doesn't define me. It's not who I am. It's a piece of who I am. It's a small cog in a very large mechanism. It's a large machine with little cogs of everything that you've gone through, all your experiences. And not one experience is who you are, but is a simple piece that makes up who you are. So, it helped me to understand that things that happen don't define you. And it's very important to realize when you're going through a scenario like that, of that's all you identify as, that's all people see you as, and it's because of whatever you're doing or what you're saying or how you're presenting yourself. And there's something to be said about realizing when that is all there is, and you need to break it up. You need to realize that there's more to me than that.
Yeah, and I think that's a good part of your keystone right there that helped you have the awareness that you were talking about just a few minutes ago, because it's okay to sit and chew on something that not letting it consume you, but coming to understand why you're having those feelings, why you're thinking this way. Why did that trigger me? Why did what my wife just said to me, set me off? Like, I shouldn't be mad or having this reaction right now. Like, why is that? Well, maybe I got to chew on that for a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, why did I let that take me over? So, man, that's awesome, man. I'm glad you have somebody like that you still
breaking that down was one of the things that actually helped my marriage as well. Because right after I got hurt, I've heard about PTSD, but I didn't know what it was. And when I started going through a lot of the symptoms and just having things that were happening, me and Megan were fighting like crazy because I was having reactions and she was wanting to fix it, but I didn't understand it, so I couldn't explain it to her. And then we literally had to break it down together, because the divorce rate for the military, I think, in general, is like in the 80 percentile.
It's high.
And then the combat wounded community, it's like in the high 90 percentile.
Okay.
It's very high because you didn't sign up for this. Even though, you said for better or worse, when one of you is missing pieces or is not the person they were or paralyzed or whatever the situation is, the other person doesn't know what to do.
Pays that price too.
And they want to help you, they want to fix you, but it's not something that they're going to be able to fix. And so it's a whole new lifestyle that you both now have to acclimate to. And it is all about the both of you acclimating, not just one, because it's the both of you together. What happens to you happens to her, and vice versa.
And understanding that on the different levels.
Exactly right.
Because no one can fully understand what you go through. I mean, like, you can describe it till you're blue in the face, but
Yep.
until it happens to you, it's one of those things like you can't fully relate to it. You can try to have a level of understanding,
Yep.
but you're never going to fully relate to it.
And those are conversations you have to have as well. Look,
Yeah.
I don't mean this in a negative way. Please understand what I'm saying here. I'm never going to be able to help you understand how this feels. And even if you went through it, we are two different people. Because of that, we feel and see and learn things differently. You'll never experience the way I did.
Absolutely. Well, what are you getting into these days now, man? What are you doing now? So we talked about your background with ICC. You've moved on from that a little bit, but what are you doing to entertain your time and everything now?
Well, I mean, now I'm kind of working on a couple of little side gigs, looking into maybe doing a business on my own. And honestly, I'm helping Megan with her business. She's relaunched her bakery business, and she's, going to school full time as well, getting her bachelor's in counseling, basically in Christian counseling. And she's actually going to use this as one of her tools as well, classes and different things, because it's a good therapy tool. And so I'm helping her out with that.
There's a lot she can share with people.
Oh, absolutely. And also, spending a lot of times with my kids. My son is going to be a junior coming up. He's about to be 16 in a couple of days. And so I'm really dedicating a lot of my time to being there for him in these really important last couple of years, helping him to really understand what's going to be coming up next. I think it's important
Absolutely.
to be there. And I've spent the last 21 years having my family support me in my career. So I decided I'm going to step back and support them. And I'll still do my things. I'm working on the behind the scenes and stuff like that. But at this point, I'm a support mechanism. I'm a backstage hand right now, and I'm okay with that. I will say it's taken me some time to acclimate that. I kind of feel like I've been disappearing a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's just a different routine. It's a different thing of duties than it used to be. So, but I'm loving it because I'm getting to do something for them and seeing the smiles on their faces.
Well, man, I think your story and showing people how you can adapt to change and move on with your life is a great thing of getting to share and hear your story like this.
I appreciate it. And, I appreciate you having me on. I know that, talking about my stuff can get long into the night, but I appreciate you having me on and giving me the opportunity to be able to just hang out with you and then,
yeah, man, I've looked forward to this.
Spread some wisdom around, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, that's what common sense is all about, man. I mean, people learn from hearing about other people's journeys.
It's a ripple effect. You say it gets to one person, then another, and it just carries on. You don't have to know where it goes, but knowing that it's getting out there. That's the important thing.
What do you think, and maybe we do this 2 parts. Actually, before I ask you this, because I'm going to forget and we're getting short on time here, we got to talk about what we're drinking, what we're smoking.
Oh, absolutely.
We're not drinking anything yet, but Brandon is a awesome cigar connoisseur. You're very well knowledged in it because, I mean, you got to have one of your dream jobs,
Absolutely.
working not only just in a place that sold cigars, but a true family experience like ICC is,
Absolutely.
which we talk a lot about on here. Maybe we separate this down, but we'll go with just cigars for right now.
Absolutely.
We are currently smoking the La Polina Goldies. This is one of Brandon and I, both of our favorites. It's in my top 5 of what I like to grab.
Oh, absolutely.
Regularly.
Absolutely.
They're phenomenal sticks. Little more on the pricey side.
They are.
Compared to what we typically smoke on the regular around here. So it's one I don't enjoy all the time, but I like to grab one every now and then. I probably should buy a box as many of these as I like to grab here and there. And
it's got a Connecticut wrap to it, so
Yeah.
it's smooth, light. It has a very crisp, clean profile to it. I was telling you before, one of the things I had read about it before I ever had one was that it was supposed to have like a banana nut type.
I've been trying since you said that.
Yeah, and so you can get a little bit of nuttiness to it, which is indicative of Connecticut. You can usually get like a light, crisp, nutty.
I get the nut. I don't get the banana, though.
I've never been able to taste the banana. So,
Yeah.
And that's the thing about reviews. It's all subjective. That's the thing about cigars. Cigars are subjective to the person. You like what you like. You don't like what you don't like. You cut how you cut. You smoke how you smoke. And you taste what you taste.
And do it that way.
And that's what you need to. Again, cigars, like anything else, is trial and error. And I love this because it's a great smoke that you can have after dinner. You can even have it in the morning. Because it's a lighter side, it's got more of like a deep profile. After you get about midway, it gets a little heavier, not by much, but you can definitely feel it a little bit more. But it's very clean and smooth.
Well balanced.
Yes.
Well balanced. It's got a good earthy tone to it.
The cedar profile to it
enjoy.
really is prominent, but it's amazing.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. I still remember one of my first experiences with you in the humidor when you were opening a box of the Byron's and you started telling me about how they smell like blueberries. And I'm like, bullshit. Like, a Byron, like, these aren't flavored. Like, you're really going to tell me something about it? You're like, come here. And, like, you pull me in and, like, no bullshit. Smelled like blueberries.
Yep.
I was like, this is
natural
insane.
fermentation. You get that blue. It almost is like a blueberry Pop-Tart. And you almost get a slight essence of it on the back draft of the smoke, but it's not infused by any means. And if you actually talk to the manufacturer and ask if it's infused, he gets very upset about that.
Mm-hmm. I would imagine so. I mean, that's got to be like probably the biggest insult you could say to Nelson.
Oh, absolutely. Byron's, Atabay's, their manufacturing process is second to none.
Yeah, by all means. Yeah, I never get the blueberry taste, but when you first open that box, it damn sure smells like blueberries.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. Like, you're definitely get that. It almost made me not want to smoke it.
Yeah,
at first.
You start to think it's infused.
I was like, I don't want to smoke something like that smells like one of these Jamaican cigars or something like that. Like, I'm out on that. 100%. Well, we also got a couple others up here. I don't think we're going to get to them on the show, but this is the new Macanudo.
This is the Mil Diaz.
Why did I say Macanudo?
It's got an M on it.
Yeah, it's got an M on it.
Yeah, this one's the Mil Diaz by Crown Heads. This is one that I've always really loved because originally it had an Ecuadorian Habano wrapper. Now it's got Sumatran as the wrapper. Really tasty, but it's got Peruvian.
Have you got to try that one yet?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
It's good.
I just smoked it for the first time yesterday.
It's very good. The Peruvian in this, it's a leaf that you can't find. It's harder to get. It's hard to get a good crop yield out of. But if you can get it in your cigar, it amplifies the flavor profile a lot, and it makes it just more prominent, and it's very, very smooth. So, and it's true to fact with the Mil Diaz. I believe that's 1,000 days. It took them about 3 months to develop, and it was originally a Luciano and Crown Heads combination, and now they've kind of separated now that Crown Heads is doing it on their own. But it is an amazing cigar. If you ever get a chance, give it a try. I guarantee you'll like it. It's got a darker wrap to it. It's more of a medium, but it has a very light presence to it.
And like I've said before, you guys have heard me say this a lot. If Luciano was involved with it, it ain't going to suck.
Nope.
Even if he's not still involved with it, I can guarantee you they're still taking those lessons they learned from him.
Oh, yeah.
And it's an excellent smoke. I would highly recommend that with coffee or a bourbon.
Yeah.
That is an excellent cigar. Even tequila, I think, would be good.
It pairs
I haven't
well with
drank
just
with
about
it yet,
anything. It really does.
but it's got that full-bodied, lot of aroma. It's a good cigar. And then I haven't smoked one of these yet, and I'm really looking forward to it. This is the Davidoff Yamasa.
Oh, I've heard of that. I haven't had one myself.
They just got them in. I haven't had this yet, but I'm looking forward to smoking this one. Well, man, we've got to start wrapping up, but there is one question I wanted to ask you before we do our typical questions. Maybe, and this is where I was saying separate it maybe. Maybe you want to talk about in the service and outside the service. What's maybe the best advice and worst advice you received in the service? And then maybe same question outside.
Best advice I got at the service was you've got to make the experience your own. You'll get a lot of people who have been at one base too long, or you call them burnouts, and they'll really saturate new troops that are coming on. And before you know it, a troop that's been there a month is acting like he's been there 25 years. And it's what you make it. It really is. The service is what you make it. You know, whether your command is great or it's not, it's your goals to make. There's plenty of things to do, to try out for, special duties, all sorts of stuff. And the best advice I ever got, well, actually, that's one of. The other best advice I ever got was when I was in tech school. My TI, he said, Byers, sometimes you just got to shut up and color. That has been in service and out of service. Sometimes you just got to shut up and color, you know, until you get high enough to where you can pick the colors, because you're not always going to understand it, but sometimes you're in a position you just got to do it. And then you get to a point where you can choose the colors, and then you understand why.
That's so true. And I think that, you know, some of these things, I think is why you were such a good fit at ICC, because, man, you ran that like a first class shop, man. And you and whether you were having a good day or a bad day, you didn't ask anybody to do anything that you weren't going to do. And I watched you do that with all the different people that came in and out in the last 2 years. Absolutely. Or so. And I think that's important too.
It is. It is. And I mean, a leader is a follower. He's a follower of true right. And it's like you said, a leader shows what needs to be done by doing it, not saying it. And so, absolutely, 100%. And I learned a lot of that in the military, but I've had some really great people show me some really great examples over my life. So
that's awesome, man. All right, now to the normal 2 questions. We'll see how much Brandon watches this show. He's probably prepared for this.
Oh, crap. No, not even close. Not even close.
All right, man. So if you got to leave your children with one piece of advice, what piece of advice would that be?
Character is everything. Your character and what you present will be a lasting impression always.
Awesome. I like that a lot. All right. Now's the fun part. It's common sense. So we like to call this segment, Give Us Your 2 cents.
All right.
So this could be something I didn't ask you that is weighing on you that you just want to put out there. It could be something we didn't get to talk about that you want to talk about, but it literally, or it could just be your 2 cents that you feel like I want to share these 2 cents, and that's it. Sometimes this is a statement. Sometimes it's a story. I mean, this goes every which direction. So literally, it's your microphone, your chance to go wherever you want with that.
Okay. I think I'm going through a lot of this with my son. He's in high school, and I don't think I'd make it in high school now. You know, when we were in high school, we didn't have social media. I mean, we barely had cell phones, okay?
Yeah, your whole life was not being put on display.
Like, you had minutes, and, like, you couldn't text at the time because it would cost too much, you know? And so, but because of all that, you know, there's just so much going on. The teenagers and kids now, they are attached into everything, you know? We had to ask people, like, and we had computers and AOL. We had the internet to an extent.
We had the Oregon Trail, and where in the world is Carmen Sandiego?
Exactly right. We could look things up, but now it's in your face all the time, and it's always opinionated news, not factual news or anything like that. But there's a lot of change going on out there. And I think the one thing that I find both frustrating and interesting is the fact of how everybody goes around and presents themselves but gets upset if someone doesn't necessarily think the way they think or feel the way they feel or believe whatever it is they believe the way they believe it. And if there's one thing I could say, it's, you know, the best thing about this country is I respect the fact that me and you don't see things the exact same way. I respect your opinion and who you are, and you do you, and more power to you. But I ask that in return. Yeah. And if that's one thing you can do is understand that everybody sees things differently, everybody feels things differently, and just because you see or say or believe or identify or whatever as whatever it is you feel and want to be, doesn't necessarily mean that someone's going to understand or see it the way you see it. And it's all about communicating, allowing people to understand where you're coming from. And if they don't feel the same way, cool, absolutely, totally understand. You know what? I respect your stance to feel that way.
Yeah.
But I don't judge you for it. I don't think you're any less than I am because of that. And just because we don't stand on the same platform doesn't mean you're any less than I am. So I think it's very fascinating to me, everything that's going on out there as far as, what people identify as, or groups they're a part of, or judging this group because they're not like this group. Well, that's the best thing about this country. You have the right to feel, say, speak, believe, whatever you want. And not everybody else has to do that.
Just give it to your neighbor too.
Exactly. I've always told my kids, mutual respect is given. The fact that you are a human being, I respect your ability to believe and say and do whatever you'd like. Everything else is earned. So if you want my respect in any other way, then present yourself and treat me like a human being, and I'll treat you as such. And the more we get along, the more I'm going to respect how you feel and what you do, and it not be some argument. It can just be a conversation. It doesn't have to be complicated.
Yeah, it can just be a conversation.
Exactly.
And you can disagree and still be friends. You don't have to be on the same page on
I'm going to have
everything.
to agree to disagree with you.
Yeah.
That is so simple but so profound. I agree to disagree, but I respect your ability to feel that way.
Absolutely, man. That's a great segment. I love that we're ending on that. I think that's excellent. Well, man, I want to thank you personally for coming and doing this. I know some of the stuff you talk about is not always the easiest, and it is a story that I think is very important for people to hear. But
thank you.
I want to thank you for coming and being so open and just sharing your experience with everybody, because I do think it's important for people
My brother,
to hear
I can't thank you enough. Anytime.
Yeah.
Always, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, we'll have to do something again when you get on down the road. And
sounds like a plan to me.
I know some of the things you have cooking, and hopefully we'll get to talk about those again soon.
Absolutely.
Well, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. This is it for this week, and next week, I'm proud to announce we're doing our last show. Derek and Cherie have been so gracious to let us record up here at the Monarch Stag. I hope you guys will come up and join us for a cigar or drink after the show. Next week's going to be the last one up here. And ICC, the remodel's finally done almost completely. So we get our old room back. It's been revamped. I'm really looking forward to shooting up there in my super comfortable normal turf. Not that I have not absolutely enjoyed this time here at the Monarch Stag. Hope you guys have enjoyed this different setting and the shows we brought to you. Next week, I'm super excited because this was the show we had scheduled for when I got sick, and he's coming on finally. But we are going to have the protector of the star with us next week, Mr. George Teague himself. So
right on.
I'm super looking forward to hashing out about this. I've watched all the stuff on it, hearing about when he let T.O. know what it's about to stand on our star at the Texas Stadium. So he's a great guy. I'm looking forward to it. I think you guys are going to really enjoy that show. And Mr. Teague's going to stay up here and have a cigar and have a drink with you guys. So if you're in the area, come up. You can sit in the background, watch the show live if you'd like, and we're gonna hang out with you guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed the show. See you guys next week. Peace.
Later.